Hello and welcome to Tech Deals i7-2600K 2nd Gen Sandy Bridge from Intel 2011. Does it hold up in 2019? 4 cores, 8 threads, and variable gigahertz depending upon how much you overclock it. This is going to be a series of just a couple of videos before I get into generational CPU testing. I have done some of this on my channel in the past, but I intend to formalize it and get a little bit more into it with a variety of CPUs over the past 10 years. This computer right here is the original i5-2500K that I built back in 2011 in this case. 8 years ago. Holy smokes, has it been that long? Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare, the online learning platform with over 25,000 classes in every subject you can imagine, from video editing to IT security to how to make French macarons. Yes, I know that doesn't really seem like a tech-related item. This is a 32-minute class on how to make them. Did you know that there are do's and don'ts of making these?
Let's review the do's and don'ts of macaron making. Do plan in advance. Making macarons is not a last-minute project. You should free up at least 3 hours in.
Well, we don't have 3 hours right this minute, but what I will say is that Marie is an award-winning cookbook writer and translator. She has published a cookbook and has another one on the way. Many of the educators and instructors on Skillshare have considerable industry experience. The first 500 people who click the link down in the video description below get 2 free months of Skillshare, and then after 2 months, it's less than $10 a month. That is an incredible value for thousands upon thousands of online courses. Now, a lot of changes have been made to this over the years. I've added more storage, more drives. The RAM configuration was changed, a liquid cooler's been installed, and oh yeah, it's no longer an i5. At some point in the past 2 years, I actually bought an i7-2600K off of eBay and replaced my i5 for just this purpose. The benchmarks you've seen on my channel in the past of the 2600K were done in this machine. It does, by the way, run at 4.5 gigahertz very well on this 120mm liquid Corsair cooler. It does very nice, but this case is big, heavy, and old, and I want to replace it. I'm going to be moving the parts from inside this computer into this wonderful BeQuiet case. It is lighter, it is simpler, it is less of a mess. I could sort of move on from this late 2000s, early 2010s design into something much, much nicer. I don't need all the drive-based storage, and I certainly don't need a case that weighs like 45 pounds. This thing is steel. It is insanely heavy. It took 2 of us to carry it up the stairs. This thing really is way overkill. So it'll be much nicer in the BeQuiet case. But that's not really what this video is about. I'm going to show you that and talk to you about it. But the main thing to do is to talk about this CPU, where it's been, where it stands in 2019, the CPUs I'm going to be comparing it against, what I think maybe you should upgrade to, but we'll take a second look at that when we do the actual benchmarks. And then I want to talk to you about the configuration I'll have this and the other machines set up in, so you have some kind of idea as to what to expect when you see those benchmark videos. Before we talk about my build and my old computer, let me talk about the new case we're going to put it in just briefly so we can get it off the desk and make ourselves some room. I'm kind of sandwiched in here between these 2 beasts of a tower. This is a BeQuiet Silent Base 800. They no longer sell this specific model. It's been replaced by a Silent Base 801. Few minor cosmetic changes, some modernization revisions. The front is now 1 piece instead of 2 separate pieces here. $135. It's a very nice case, and most importantly, it comes with BeQuiet fans. If you want a silent system, if you want a premium build, BeQuiet cases aren't cheap, but they're not cheap. I already had this. I've had something else in it previously. I took it out and moved it over to something else. So since this was sitting in the closet, actually, sorry to say, I decided to use it for this because I can take all my components out, put them in there, and I'll have no issues with airflow or cooling or cards or anything else I want to put in there. The power supply is already installed, saving me some trouble, and it is the very nice straight power 800-watt power supply from BeQuiet. Way overkill for what we're going to be putting in there, but at least it provides me with a nice silent power supply with all the power in the world to put 1 or 2 graphics cards in there with no complaints whatsoever. Well, that's a vast improvement. You can actually see me now, and I have some room to breathe up here. Now we can actually see the computer. Now I've done some close-up shots, and I'll put those up here to show you a few things as we go. Not that it's really important because I'm going to rip everything out of here anyway. In fact, I'm not keeping very much from this tower. This is a Thermaltake tower. I don't know the model. It's old and obsolete and irrelevant at this point. As I said, it's made out of steel and it weighs an absolute ton. Now there are some hard drives in there and a few other things. It really is close to 50 pounds. It is utterly ridiculous. Moving this is painful. It's a two-person job. I'm not going to move the power supply. This is a laser power supply. I think it's a King. I went in the other room and guess what I found? I found the retail box to this power supply. This is a Kingwin 1000 watt, 80 plus bronze power supply, dated, I have no idea. It has a 3-year warranty. A 1000 watt power supply with a 3-year warranty. Who would have ever thought they'd make such things? I'm not moving it over. It's old at this point. I'm not going to bother. There's a beautiful, wonderful power supply in the new case. There are a bunch of drives in here. In fact, the only thing I'm moving from this case: motherboard, RAM, CPU, cooler. I'm not moving any of the drives. There's a reason why this Samsung 960 EVO is sitting on the desk. There is actually a Samsung SSD in there. It has been in there a long time. I don't remember if it's original to this machine. My memory and my records don't go back that far. This computer currently has a Samsung 840 SSD in it. I believe it's a 500 gig drive. I haven't looked in a while, but I believe it's 500 gigs. It would have been very expensive back then for 500 gigs. It is not an Evo or a Pro. It's the original straight 840. It's a fine drive and it beats hard drives, but it is out of date at this point. And when I do the CPU comparisons, I'm also going to be doing non-gaming testing as well. I'll be doing a 7-zip and Cinebench and render tests and a variety of other things. I want to make sure that I make these systems as fair as is practicable. So I'm going to be putting a modern Samsung 860 EVO SSD in here to remove any limitations of having old and outdated drives that might impact performance. Probably not, but we're going to be sure. By this point, some of you are bound to say, what is that cable management mess? That is absolutely atrocious. You would be correct. If you watched my $4,000 Ultimate System build from 2016, my Broadwell E, the very first really big build that I did on my channel, I got a lot of comments about my cable management or lack thereof in that build. My builds since then have been much nicer. Truth be told, I don't care as much as I think a lot of people who watch videos do, so long as there's sufficient airflow, so long as we don't have a temperature problem, which is one reason why I like big, huge cases, because if you have a large enough case, then it doesn't really matter. Although this actually, after installing all those bays and drives, kind of did block the airflow. But the systems that I built more recently, even that Broadwell E that I built in 2016 with all the mess of cables I left in there, airflow was never an issue. And yes, I did check. It simply wasn't an issue. If you watch the recent video where we turned that system into a Threadripper 2, that was a beast of an upgrade, going from 6 cores to 16 cores, from an i7-2600K to a TR2950X. Holy smokes. Yeah, just a little monster upgrade. So that was nice, but that case has ridiculous airflow in it now because there's nothing in it anymore. But this is an absolute mess, and I acknowledge that. In the front, and I'll show you some footage of it here, in the front of the case are actually 6 hot swap 3.5-inch drive bays. Remember, this computer comes out of a different era. This computer comes from a time when SSDs were special and rare and expensive, and you use them only for boot and your most important programs. Nobody would even dream of building an all SSD machine back in 2011. Much less put multiple terabytes of SSD space. That would have been absolutely nuts. So there were a variety of drives in here. There used to be 4 drives down here in the bottom. I've since pulled them out. There were 4 4-terabyte drives in the bottom that got moved to my 4770K, and they're actually not in there anymore either. That's a side point. Those got put into my media PC. If you saw my ultimate media home theater PC build, which some people loved and some people disagreed with my definition of ultimate home theater media PC, that had an i5-8400. In my opinion, for something that basically plays videos, streams videos, transcodes videos, downloads videos, an i5-8400 is actually kind of overkill. A Pentium G5400 would do it just fine. This would do it just fine. The i7-920 that I was using was just fine, although it was really getting dated in places. You could feel it. It definitely was slow. The new machine is incredibly fast. It really is. Just in terms of usability, clicking, opening things, just watching YouTube. YouTube played fine on the old machine, but just browsing YouTube and opening things and opening web pages was noticeably slow, so that was a nice upgrade. In any case, up top here are still 4 drives. There's 6 bays, 2 are empty. There are 4 3-terabyte drives. I'm going to be saving those. Those are going into a new storage project I'll be doing on the channel very, very soon. Wendell over at Level 1 Techs has sent me 2 very cool 4U external storage racks from a job. He pulled them out of something or whatnot. I sent him a piece of hardware he was looking for, and he sent me those, and I certainly appreciate that. Thanks, Wendell. That's really cool. So I'm going to have enough space to store a ridiculous number of drives. So I'm going to put a lot of drives into that, and that's going to be coming up pretty soon on the channel. So none of that's staying. There's actually a 500 gig Western Digital Blue hard drive in there as well, which was left in there. That won't be going in the storage array. Frankly, it'll go on the shelf as a curiosity as more than anything else. What are you going to do with a 500 gig drive in 2019? Speaking of benchmarking and testing, I said at the beginning of the video that I was going to talk about how I was going to set this up to be as fair and equitable as possible in my upcoming testing. Part of the reason I'm explaining this here is I'm not going to explain it in those videos. It makes them too long. I'll just reference the fact that I've discussed it on my channel, and hopefully you all are big enough fans that you've watched every video on my channel, and so you see stuff like this. I'm just trying to have fun with it. What can I say? You'll notice in front of me we have several brand new Intel CPUs, or almost brand new Intel CPUs. We have an i7-8700K, we have an i9-9900K, and we have a, hold on, an i9-9900K? What in the world? Very simple. If you watched my i9 launch video, you've already seen this box. This is the box that Intel sent press samples to the press to review. And all of my launch benchmarks and the benchmarks you've seen in the first 4 or 5 months of the i9's availability were on the press chip. This is a retail chip. And the retail chip is not here to be put into a build. I'm going to put the press chip into a build. The retail chip is here to go onto my test bench. When you see my generational comparisons where I test each of the generations, 2nd gen, 4th gen, 7th gen, 9th gen, they will all be with retail chips, not press chips. I think that's very important to double check to make sure that the press chips they send us for sampling and the retail chips you can buy, this was bought from Amazon.com with my own money, as was this. This is not how the 8700K press chip was sent to me. This is actually the box they sent me the 8700K press chip. There's nothing in it at the moment because it's down on my test bench. The i7-8700K Cadillac build that you've seen on my channel, the $2,000 build, my press chip actually went into that. That's what I've done on my Twitch live streaming on and my game playing on. The retail chip is actually on my test bench downstairs. Except for the launch benchmarks, virtually every 8700K benchmark you've seen on my channel was with the retail chip and not the press chip. The same thing's going to happen with the i9-9900K. Speaking of which, buying this stuff gets very, very expensive, especially when Intel's already sending me CPUs. Use those links in the video description below to Amazon and Newegg when you're shopping, regardless of what you might be buying this particular week. Paper towels, peanut butter, it all supports the channel and I would greatly appreciate it. And it lets me do things like buy retail chips to make absolutely sure the performance that I'm getting is the performance that you'll get. That brings me to the CPU configurations themselves. There is no way to equalize the speeds and have it make any rational sense. Try as I might, my i7-2600K does not do 5 gigahertz. Maybe if I fed it ridiculous voltage and put a 360mm liquid cooler on it, maybe it would, but that's a bit crazy. And I haven't tried it and I'm not going to. Likewise, an i9-9900K does not run at 4.5 gigahertz ever. The i9-9900K, regardless of what they advertise as the base speed, forget it. What it actually does in the real world is it runs at 4.7 gigahertz, all cores, turboing to 5.0. Turn on multi-core enhancement, boom, 5 gigahertz, easy overclock, no multiplier adjustments required, easiest 5 gigahertz ever. Both my i7-2700K and my i7-8700K also run at 5 gigahertz without an issue. My 4th gen chips, both my i7-4770K, yes, there's a lot of product numbers here, and my i7-4790K, Devil's Canyon Haswell refresh, because Broadwell wasn't really ready for prime time, which is why there's no 5th generation K chip. Neither of those will run at 5 gigahertz either. They struggle at 4.5, just due to their generation, and I have a 140mm liquid cooler on both. So the generations prior to the 7th will be run at 4.5. This runs at 4.5 great. My 4770K and my 4790K will both run at 4.5 with a little bit of extra voltage thrown on them. For testing purposes, it's fine, they're old enough now. The 7700K, the 8700K, and the 9900K, 7th, 8th, and 9th gen, will all be run at 5 gigahertz. I understand these aren't the same speeds, but it makes no sense to slow down an i9-9900K to 4.5. It will never run at that speed. If you buy one and do nothing, you'll get 4.7. That doesn't want to run at 4.7. Random blue screens make testing it next to impossible, and I guess I could put a bigger cooler and try to put some more voltage to make it more stable, but you're really pushing it. People have gotten 4.7 and 4.8 out of this generation. My chip doesn't want to, so I have to find a happy medium. So before 7th will be 4.5, and 7th and beyond will be 5.0, and that's just the way it is. Now, as far as system RAM goes, all the systems will have 16 gigabytes of RAM, but the speed is going to vary. This system has DDR3 1600. The motherboard, the Asus Z68 Pro Rev 3 board that's in here right now, actually supports up to DDR3 2200, although that's not really an official speed as far as I know, but it does support 2133. Now that RAM's not 2133, and I might take the DDR3 2400 out of my 4th gen systems and put it in here and try running it at 2133 to see what happens. We'll see how that goes. I might do that. I might leave this in here. All of the more recent systems, 7th, 8th, and 9th gen, all run DDR4 3200. There's simply no reason to run anything other than 3200 in those systems. And frankly, if you're buying an i9, maybe 3600 or 4000 makes sense. It isn't a huge speed boost, but as the prices start to come down, and RAM prices really have come down lately, if it's only a $20 or $30 upgrade, it might be worth the extra money. Depends upon the CL or the cache rating, because if you have a cache rating of 19 or 21 versus a rating of 14 or 16, you have higher latency with faster speed, and they cancel each other out. So do be aware of higher latencies on some of the cheaper RAM kits. For CPU generational testing, there is only one choice for a graphics card, an RTX 2080 Ti. Specifically, this one, the Asus ROG Strix Factory Overclocked 2080 Ti. Rest assured, I will be using the exact same graphics card on all the test systems. You can't do this kind of generational testing otherwise, so I'll move it from machine to machine as needed, and this will be the one I use. Here we have the computer on its side, and we're doing this one a bit different, old school for an old computer. Rather than use my overhead camera, I actually just brought the front camera forward and turned it at an angle and pointed it down. I thought, you know what, we'll do this the way it was done a long time ago in honor of this old computer. Hopefully this footage comes out really nicely, because I can really only do this once. This is actually very simple. I'm simply going to go around and disconnect all of the cables. I'm going to try leaving the liquid cooler in place so I don't have to demount and remount it, because I know the way it's mounted now, it runs at 4.5, so I kind of want to keep it. We'll take the RAM out just so we don't damage it in the process of taking it out, and we're not going to keep this card anymore. That's a USB 3 card. The motherboard has USB 3. That was just for extra ports. So let's get started. First things first, let's take the RAM out. When is the last time you saw one of these? Is that Ripjaw Z? This is a 4 GB by 4 memory kit, 16 gigabytes. DDR3 1600 CL9 9-9-9-24 1.5 volts. That is very old school. Also much tighter timings than modern RAM. Here's a fun challenge for you. Try to figure out what 16 gigabytes of Ripjaw Z would have cost back in 2011. I have no idea. I don't have any purchase records for this back then, so I have no idea what I paid for it. That is what the comment section is down there for. Let me know your thoughts. We will remove the CPU power connector. It has an 8-pin, just like modern systems. This is an interesting case design where there's holes in the side to put your screwdriver through and unscrew your screws. I don't know what they were thinking, but that's how they designed it. This old ASUS motherboard has a USB 3 header on it, but this case does not have USB 3 cables. So what I was using was this adapter cable that connects USB 3 header to provide 2 USB 3 ports to the back of the case. For some reason I had this adapter card in place. It's a PCI Express 1X card, provides 2 more USB 3 ports for the back, and for some reason it wants a Molex power connector, which I had connected right here. I am not sure that I really ever used these ports. This is a USB 2 to 2 port header for the back of your case. It's just an adapter. You buy these for $5 on Amazon. They plug into a USB 2 port on the board. The back of this motherboard has 8 USB ports on it, plus the 2 more from the card, plus the 2 more from here. What did I need all these USB ports for? Would you all laugh at me if I told you I don't remember? One thing that's helpful to do while you are working on a system like this or taking it apart is to get all the cables out of the way. Now let's disconnect all the front panel connectors. These have been a mess for a long time. It does have one of these handy adapters where the front panel connectors plug into it and then it plugs into the board. Yeah, come on, motherboard companies, case manufacturers, do something about that. Anybody recognize this plug? $13.94. This motherboard has FireWire on it, and this case has a front panel FireWire connector, which I have never used. 2 USB 2 header connectors for the front. This case has 4 USB 2 ports on the front of it, and this board has 3 connectors, which is why I had the third one for the back. When is the last time you saw a motherboard with 3 USB 2 headers on? Front panel audio. Now this is the HD audio standard. However, if you look, they also provide the AC97 standard, which you're not going to find on modern cases. Modern cases usually just have the HD audio connector, so that's kind of a throwback. Let's disconnect our fan from the motherboard. Time to disconnect all of our serial ATA data cables. There are a ton of them. As I mentioned, there are drives in 4 of these 6 bays right here, these hot swap bays. There is another drive right here, which is connected by a cable, so I can't pull it out just yet. And then there is a Samsung, I believe, we'll pull it out here in a second, 500 gig, 840, non-Evo, non-Pro drive. So we will disconnect all of these plugs. And for the moment, oh, that has a, there we go. We'll just shove those to the side. Now we need to remove the 24-pin ATX power cable. This is a bit tricky. In fact, you may not be able to see it with all these red cables in the way. Put your fingers behind the board, support the board with the edge, push the clip in, and be real gentle. Well, that came out nice and easy. I just basically gently rocked it back and forth, taking each end out, and so the power cable's out. Now we need to unscrew the fan and cooler from the back of the case. As I said, I'm gonna leave it attached to the board. My goal is to not remove it. I know it works, I know it runs at 4.7, and I don't wanna mess with it. Make sure to save our special screws. These have an empty space that goes through the fan itself, and they actually screw into the radiator. With those, you notice I've got my hand right here. It's just gonna fall off otherwise, and so very carefully we'll take this out of the way, and we will take the fan out and set the fan aside, and we'll rest this over because we don't want it to impact on the board. Now we're going to take our screwdriver and we're going to unscrew the motherboard. With all the screws out of the board, now we just have to very gently lift the board up and take it out of the case. And there we go. There is our Asus Z68 Pro Rev 3 motherboard. Ironically, the most valuable thing in this computer, I think. More so than the SSD cooler or even the CPU. I think these boards still go for good money because they run these CPUs. I could be wrong. I did not actually look up the value before I started, but sometimes old motherboards are worth more than the chips. With the case turned over, there's really nothing special on the back, and you may notice something interesting. There is no hole in the back of the motherboard tray. Cases of this era often didn't have holes. You can't access the back of the motherboard without taking it out of the case. The only thing I'm doing back here is disconnecting all the cables. With the case flipped back over, there's a couple of interesting things about a case of this age. I believe this is the power connector to the front fan. Yes, this is just at the tail end of the era where cases still used Molex connectors for their fans. We do have a DVD drive in here, and I will disconnect it. This is also where I'm going to disconnect. You can't see it. I probably should have turned the case around, but whatever. These are all of the SATA cables, which I'm going to keep, that went to all of these hot swap trays. I don't think I'm going to use these hot swap trays for anything. They work fine, I'm sure. I haven't used them in a while. I haven't used these drives in a while. But 8-year-old hot swap trays, I don't know that those are very useful, but I will keep the cables. This cable is kind of interesting. This is attached to the case. Not only does this case have 4 USB 2 headers connectors on the front of the case, not only does it have FireWire, which is right here, it also has external serial ATA. There's one external. This is back when we thought we were going to do that before USB frankly completely took over. So there is a serial ATA connector, an external serial ATA connector on the front, and you're supposed to use this cable to plug it into one of the slots on your motherboard. Now with the cables disconnected, we can pull this hot swap tray out. And this is a 500 gig Western Digital Caviar Blue, which frankly will go on the shelf. And now finally we can pull out the Samsung drive. This is definitely before the era of toolless trays. In fact, it's before the era of 2.5-inch trays. There's no 2.5-inch trays in here. This is for 3.5-inch drives. This is an adapter, so I have to do a bunch of unscrewing. With those 4 screws out, it should just, there we go. Got to be careful, these are sharp metal edges. And then we can unscrew the SSD from this tray. And there we have a Samsung 840 500 gig drive. Again, I don't know what I paid for this. I don't know when I bought it. I had a brief search, I couldn't find it, but you know, it doesn't matter at this point. It's fine, I'll use it as a game drive, but I'm not gonna use it as a boot drive at this point. And while we're at it, we'll take the probably useless 3.5-inch drive out of here, just so we can put the tray back in. Now the question is, what do I do with this case? Keep it as a relic? It really isn't worth, I kid you not, this thing weighs a ton. It does, however, have a lot of drive bays. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I do have one of these somewhere in one of my drawers or something. I'm pretty sure I took it out just to free up space so I could put cables there. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 drive bays. They don't make them like that very often, at least not anymore. That's pretty impressive. And You can remove them. This here unscrews and this unscrews, and you can pull this entire cage out. There's a screw here you can't see and a screw there, and these bottom cages come out. This doesn't. This is actually welded in, but these are removable and adjustable. And I could be wrong. I don't know if you could have gotten extra trays that fit on here or not, but this had a ton of expansion for its day. Well, that's enough of this. Let's put the BeQuiet case here and get the computer moved over. Just a quick side note, something I want to show you here. This is the BeQuiet side panel for the Silent Base 800. Standard metal panel with a nice logo and an indentation. Nothing fancy, right? When we turn it over, you will notice we have sound insulation here. This is very, very nice. This is actually a thick sound insulation material. Now you notice it's missing here. However, do you see these screw holes? Do you see these clips? Take this out, put a fan here, and have air circulation, I suppose. This is nice to see. Here you can see we have the Silent Base 800 case sitting right here. Just looking inside this, I can see some improvements they made in the new one, but I don't have the new one, I have this one, so this is what we're gonna do. The power supply is already installed. We just need to move some of the cables out of the way. This is gonna be fairly straightforward. There are some fans already installed up here in the top. There are 2 in the front, and then our liquid cooler exhaust fan is gonna go right here in the back. One other thing, there is no 2.5-inch drive bay right here. In fact, you've got 1, 2, 3 5.25-inch bays, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 3.5-inch bays. Where are we gonna put the SSD? Great question, glad you asked. See these 2 screws right here? We're going to unscrew this. Well, this comes out much easier if you take the screw out from the back. I had to turn it over to take the screw out, so. Okay, that drive cage, I guess they don't want any rattles. There's 2 rails here and 2 rails there, and I had to use all kinds of force, and that was stupid. That was really hard to get out. Shame on you, BeQuiet, for not making that easier to get out. Now there's rails down there and there's rails up here. I presume that you can get another one of these cages or maybe a smaller cage and put it there. These may be rails up here. You might actually be able to mount it here. I see 2 screw holes. There's a screw hole there. You might be able to. I'm not 100% sure, but regardless, so we've taken it out. When I turn it up this way, you'll notice we have 2.5-inch drive mounting. If I stick the drive under here, those holes should line up. So we can install a 2.5-inch SSD to this drive cage here, and the drive cage actually slides in on these rails here. So the SSD is right here with the cable going in the back. Now, in the process of getting this nonsense out, I did discover, flipping the case over, there are 2 2.5-inch drive tray mounting points back here. To be completely honest, I had forgotten they were even here. If I want to install more than just one SSD, I'm going to need these because that's not going to be enough. I mentioned before that I'm going to be installing a Samsung 860 EVO 1TB SSD as the boot drive. I am going to do that. I want to make sure I give this machine every opportunity. I'm not trying to handicap the older CPU in any way. However, I need some more SSD space. I am going to put the 840 back in just to install games. I'll put games like League of Legends, CSGO, World of Warships, World of Tanks, games that aren't going to be caring about the SSD. I'm going to put those on this. Why? Because I have it and it's paid for, and why not? I also have this Western Digital Blue 1TB drive. This is a modern 3D NAND high performance drive, and it will get all of the other games. So between these 3 drives, I'll have 2.5 terabytes of space, and that'll be enough for Windows and all of the games in my testing library. First drive is screwed in and mounted. We'll stick it right here and screw that in. And with that drive screwed in, we will stick it right here and screw that into place. Something I want to give BeQuiet credit on. The screws that hold these trays in place, the screw that held that tray in place, the screws that hold the side panels in place are all the same screws. This is a good thing. Now that that is done, it's time to put our motherboard into place. Couple of things. Because the power supply is already here, we have our 24-pin ATX connector, our 8-pin CPU connector up here. This case doesn't need post installed. It comes with these basically indentations in the metal, which is really nice. You just screw the board directly to those. It makes installation really convenient. So let's grab our motherboard and put it in place. The only other thing we need to do, almost forgot, grab the IO shield out of the old case and move it over here. If you need any further proof of how far motherboard design has come in the past 8 years, try and find a motherboard that looks like this today. Look how ridiculous it looks on this case. Unfortunately, this case has the orange accents. You can also get these BeQuiet cases without them. You can get them in black or silver and a couple other colors. This one's orange and it clashes, but yeah, whatever. Let's put this in. Well, that fits perfectly. The center post is a holder. It's not actually a screw, so I only need 8 screws this time around. I'll just set this right here. No need to demount the cooler, and we'll screw our board into place. Thankfully, the screws used to do this have not changed in like forever. For such a nice, beautiful case, that is a really ugly motherboard. Thankfully, it doesn't matter. Go around and double check all your screws. With the motherboard installed, let's get the CPU power connector installed. And the cable doesn't want to twist. The orientation is actually different than modern motherboards. I am glad I installed that before I put the cooler back here, because that was not easy to install. Part of it is the stiffness of the cable, part of it is just the orientation, but that went in just fine. Actually, while we're here, look how easy this is. That's going to be the easiest installation ever because it's already there. Now we need to take our 120mm fan, making sure that it is set to exhaust in this direction. Putting our first screw into place, you can see it sticks through. Well, you can't quite, but I'm not going to move the case. You have to take my word for it that it fits. We're going to take the radiator and we're going to twist it until we have the mounting orientation that we want. Okay, you may or may not be able to see it well, but the CPU power connector down here is pushing up against this, and it was very hard to get this in place. I had to practically bend that at a 180-degree angle and push it under this fan here. This corner in general, where the CPU VRMs and everything meet, is often a challenge in many, many builds. And I actually had to take this back off and play around with it and shove that cable in there. It's not ideal, but my options are limited just based upon the size of the cooler and the radiator here. So that's what we went with. This is now firmly attached, and this is not going anywhere. These top 2 fans need to be plugged in, and they are 4-pin PWM fans. There's a 4-pin connector right here. The only challenge is if I just plug this in right there, do you see this? Yeah, this isn't cool. And then there's also this fan connector, which will get plugged in. Well, now hold the presses. This is interesting. Here's a 3-pin fan connector. There's a 3-pin fan connector. And I know there's a 3-pin fan. They actually made motherboards back then. This is not that old. And there's only, that's interesting. So we're actually short fan headers. I can use splitters to split a 4-pin and allow it to drive these fans. And I may have to, what are the front fans? The front fans are 3-pin. Interesting, the front fans are DC powered and these are PWMs. The front fans are actually not silent wings, they're pure wings. These are silent wings that I added to the case for extra ventilation. These are exhaust, those are intake, and this is exhaust. This case is going to have crazy stupid airflow. So these two can be plugged in here and here. Okay, change of plans. I went ahead and plugged this back fan into the 3-pin header here. this fan into the 4-pin header. So this will have to be DC controlled, which I am pretty sure, I hope it can be. And then those are of course DC for the front. So I have some lovely, ugly red zip ties I'm going to use, which completely clash, but I don't care. Just as a side note, these rubber hoses do not have mesh protectors. I have in the past mesh protectors like these power cables do. I have in the past zip tied fan cables to them when they have the mesh, this weave connector on them. I will not zip tie anything to a rubber hose like this. Now it may actually have, it looks like it may have mesh underneath. I'm not taking chances. I'm leaving that alone. Well, this is not ideal, but this is a test system that won't be used all that much. There is enough tension in these cables. There's a gap space back here. I simply shoved the cable for this fan and the cable for this down into this gap, and tension, just the shape of the cable and the space, are holding them there for the moment. These fans blow up, so they should stay. I'll check them when I first turn it on. And then this fan is simply tied off over here to keep it out of the way. While we're here, we can connect our front panel USB connector. I imagine quite a few motherboards from 2011 did not have that. Now is as good a time as any to reinstall our RAM. I commented on possibly using faster RAM. I will get it all set up with this RAM first because I know for sure that it works. And then at some point I might test faster RAM. I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference with this generation, and I know this board's support of high-speed RAM is not assured, so we'll see. Leave me a comment down in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. Is DDR3 1600 good enough for a second-gen Sandy Bridge? Is that what you would expect to be on here? Do you really want to see 2133 to see if that makes a big difference? Let me know. Front panel USB 2 and front panel HD audio. We can stick those right here. And the HD audio goes right over here. This board has what at the time was decent audio. This is a Realtek ALC 892, I believe. And they're still selling motherboards with that to this day. I am not going to put the other adapter cable in. This is the USB 2. I seriously don't need any USB 2 ports, so I'm going to leave that out. We do need to connect some serial ATA data cables to these connectors, and these are the additional ones provided by the AS Media chip. So we want to start off with the white ones and the blue ones. I'm going to connect these. Yes, I know they're ugly and they don't match the case, but again, I don't care. I'm going to connect them to the drives on the back. Well, this is suitably awful. If I cared, I would adjust this. For those of you who have seen my bad cable management in the past, it's been much better lately. This is awful. I'm not even going to try because frankly, I'm going to use this machine for a week and then it will go back on the shelf, and then I'll pull it out again in a year or two for another week of regression testing and testing CPUs, so to heck with it. It's a mess, but it's going to stay this way. I'm simply going to make sure everything lays flat for the back. There's plenty of room back here. And then I'm going to put the back cover on. So yes, it is terrible. I know. See, it's wonderful. You can't see a thing. It must be perfect under there. I did have to get out power cable from the power supply box. Keep your power supply boxes when you have these modular power supplies because otherwise you're screwed. I did not have any serial ATA data cables plugged into that power supply. So I had no way to power the drives without getting out my box of cables. And since I had them all, I was all set. Yes, this is lovely, but with the back in place, it's not horribly terrible. I'm going to take my clippers and clip off the excess zip ties before we do anything else. There we go. We have our 3 SSDs plugged in here. The power cables are all plugged in. The new Samsung Evo drive is right here, and then the two older drives are in the back. We've got the front panel connectors plugged. Well, we've got the USB and audio. I need to plug in the front panel connectors. Did I forget to do that? I did forget to do that. I'll do that off recording. I'm not going to show that plugged in. I need to screw these two in. And we're back. Okay, the front panel connectors are properly plugged in. This is properly screwed in front and back. These are our two PCI Express power connectors. There's only two plugged in. There are more in the power supply box. If I ever decide to do SLI testing on this, I'll add them. I doubt I ever will. So these are plenty. At this point, let's put our graphics card in. May I present you the Asus ROG Strix RTX 2080 Ti, currently running about $1,300. This is worth more than the whole rest of the computer combined, including the new case and power supply and SSDs and everything else. Please, nobody watching, buy one of these to put in an i7-2600K. If you have $1,300 for a graphics card, build a new computer. However, I will be using this for the purpose of testing the generations, and you have to use the same graphics card in all of them. So we will simply install the card very carefully. That just barely fits. If you did want to put two in, well, yeah, I guess it fits, but there's no airflow and this would be in the way. And yeah, don't do that. First of all, if you have $2,600 for two of these, you could buy a much nicer case than this. So whatever. It does the job. It works. Now we just have to plug in our power. Don't count your chickens before they're hatched. I had to take the back panel off again. I ran the cables back there, through there, over here, and up here because there was no way to do it. So I was overconfident in closing up the back. But this is a working computer. I mean, well, it should be, hopefully. Everything's plugged in, everything's connected, front panel connectors, USB, front audio, video card, power, all three drives are connected. Our RAM's installed, our cooler's in, all of the, that's plugged in there. This is plugged in. Oh, I forgot those slide. These do slide back and forth because they're on rubber shock mounts. I'll just slide those down and they'll hold the cables in place. This should be ready to go. I should be able to plug this in, apply some power, and boot it up. Well, that was an interesting experience. I decided to go ahead and put the whole thing in one video. Hopefully you guys found that interesting, informative, useful, or just entertaining. This is a different style video for me, especially to do the initial conversation where I talk about what I'm doing and why, and then to put what I'm doing into the same video. It's going to make it quite long. Traditionally, videos like this end up being 3 or 4 parts, and the first one gets lots of views, and then the rest of them, frankly, don't get that many. So instead, I just kept going and put the entire thing in. I still need to put the front panel on, and of course, I still need to install Windows. I'm not going to show you installing Windows. I've done that many times on the channel, so there really is no point. I do have to say that it was relatively easy to do. There were a few snags, but overall, I think the build looks very, very nice. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you still have an i7-2600K? Have you held off all these years in upgrading and you're maybe thinking now's the time? Maybe you're thinking the next generation is now. Ryzen, the Ryzen 3rd gen is coming this summer, and then Intel will certainly have more CPUs October sometime timeframe later this year. I will be using this build ongoing to do testing of CPU generations. One more thing before we go, just as a fun little thing. I don't know if I've ever shown this on the channel before. This is my i7-7700K. This I've owned since before I had a YouTube channel. This is what I started the YouTube channel with and what I edited the initial 4K videos with. I replaced this with the Broadwell E, the i7-6800K 6-core 12-thread chip. It currently has a GTX 1070 for the win. But when I do the testing, I'll take this out and put it through the various machines. But if you're curious as to what my 4th gen machine, or one of them, looks like in any case, here you go. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with that big huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions. Let me know what you thought of this video. It was a lot of work and a lot of hours to make. That'll be down in the comment section below. Please consider checking the links down below. As I mentioned to you before, if you like these kind of videos, if you want to support the channel, use the various links down there, Amazon, Newegg, eBay, etc., as well as the others. Support the channel while shopping at no extra cost to you. I would greatly appreciate it. If you'd like early access videos, check out the link to Floatplane down there. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can get early access to videos, no YouTube ads. Shh, I won't tell if you don't. And then you can also get some exclusive videos that never appear over here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. I will see all of you next time.